You are listening to the Cookbook Love Podcast with Maggie Green, episode number 342.
Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast, a podcast that celebrates cookbook readers, buyers, collectors, writers, and clubs. And now your host, cookbook author, culinary dietitian, and cookbook writing coach, Maggie Green.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Cookbook Love Podcast. How's everybody doing today? Hope you're all doing well. We are enjoying NCAA basketball season, and we are enjoying the beginning of spring, and going to plan in a few weeks to head to Chicago to visit our two sons that live there. So we are looking forward to having a few great weeks here and getting out of the house and out of Kentucky for a trip. We've been home all winter, and I'm just looking forward to spring. Had a great winter, but it's always nice to have some trips on the horizon, time to spend with family and friends. So today on the podcast, I'm excited to have an interview with Kaleb Wyse. Kaleb is the creator of Wyse Guide and the author of the new cookbook, There's Always Room at the Table. When Kaleb started documenting his daily life on his farm in Iowa, he didn't think many people would take notice or even care. After all, his way of life seemed simple to him, guided by the seasons where he spent his days gardening, preserving, baking, and cooking, a rhythm not all that different from that of his parents, grandparents, and even great-grandparents who worked the land before him. But it turns out that people from all over the country fell in love with what Kaleb had to say. His basic back to basics way of living, his hearty homestyle cooking, everything from casseroles to biscuits, hit the sweet spot for nostalgia for some and are a breath of fresh air for others. So today on the show, we're going to visit with Kaleb, learn all about his journey, first on social media, where he leaned into his life in Southeast Iowa, on his family's farm, and then journey to writing his own cookbook, There's Always Room at the Table. So without further delay, let's dive into this interview with Kaleb Wyse. Hi, Kaleb. Welcome to the Cookbook Love Podcast.
Hello. Thank you for having me. I'm really excited.
Yes, I'm very excited you're here to talk about your brand new book, There's Always Room at the Table. But before we get started, I would love for you to tell our listeners a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Sure. I'm Kaleb Wyse. I'm located in Southeast Iowa. I'm the fourth generation to move home to my family farm. So right now I live across the road from where I grew up. My mom is still in the generational farmhouse. I'm in a house that my grandparents purchased in the early 80s. My parents lived in it, and then they flopped houses when my parents took over the farm. So it's it's where I very much am rooted, and probably the reason I moved home. The problem was I went to college for accounting and business, and neither of those really were something I was passionate about, but it was at a time of life where obviously you don't know what you want to do. So when I moved home, I just thought somehow it would be this wonderful depiction of how I grew up, and I would enjoy it, even though I didn't want to traditionally farm. And so I was driving 45 minutes to work. I hated it. I was not enjoying life. And I finally, slowly, I started something on Instagram and then a website. And it took a lot of years to figure out what that was going to be. And I would say those years, while it was frustrating for me, it was really formative in me figuring out what I was going to share and how I was going to share it. I think I started thinking it needed to be very formal and food I was not necessarily used to, and things that weren't authentic to me, just because I thought that's what you had to do to kind of prove yourself as a food person. Like, I can do French macarons, even though I have no story about them, or why would I do them? So it really wasn't until Wyse Guide started being very just true to who I was, kind of in 2019, right before the pandemic, started sharing videos and recipes that were just me, how I grew up, kind of my fresher take on them. I have a huge vegetable garden. So I was doing preserving, bringing the food in, what I like to do with it. And it finally clicked, I think, for me, but then also for other people to say, oh, hey, I see what you're doing. I understand that. Or I remember my grandma doing that or something. And so that's finally when it kind of started clicking. And the food on my website kind of transformed into that kind of fresher takes on kind of nostalgic Midwest food. And so it kind of just kept evolving into what it is today.
Yeah, wonderful. And that all you said started with a presence on Instagram and then your website. So what drove it more? The things you love to do or the things that people were responding to?
It was, like I said, 2019 was a really interesting year because this started in 2012.
Yeah.
And so all those years, kind of nothing much happened. And it was starting to just kind of be grading when you have a full-time job, which had changed a couple times in that time for me. But full-time job and doing this nights and weekends. And it was a lot. It was a lot of work. It was a lot of effort. And it was a lot of what felt like throwing things away and nothing really would ever kind of stick. And so it was kind of in 2019, I was like, you know what? I'm going to be really real. I'm just going to do the things I am comfortable with doing, whether it's showing people out in the garden, which I used to think was kind of ugly. I'm dirty, I'm whatever, but I'm just going to show you what I'm doing. Or the food is the same way. Like I'm going to actually show you how I'm canning and why I'm canning, even though I was like, well, who cans anymore? And I think it was, especially, I should say, because of the pandemic, but those videos I think really resonated with people saying, one, it was food they wanted to make. It wasn't something that was kind of out of bounds. It was something that was somewhat easy, weeknight, whether it was comfort food, nostalgic, whatever it was. I think it was the clicking of me being very confident about it because it is what I knew. And I think that came across to people. And then it resonated with them saying, wait a minute, I remember things like that. So I think it was those two kind of working together a little bit.
Yeah. 2012 to 2019, that's 7 years. Some people don't they don't stick with it that long.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that was kind of the talk in 2019. There's two of us at that time with Wise Guide. And we were kind of like, okay, if we're going to go out, we're going to go out with a bang, knowing kind of we put everything into it. Right. And I feel like before that, I had always kind of had filters. And I decided, and whether that's even things from growing up, you have certain maybe tendencies that you're scared of showing your true self. And I think maybe it was just becoming more of an adult too. I was like, if I'm going to do this, I'm not going to care anymore. Like when I post a video, even to Facebook, if someone I know sees it and I'm embarrassed, I'm not going to care. I'm going to just share something that's purely what I want to do. And so before I was willing to give up on what felt like the dream that felt right for me, which was presenting, creating and developing and posting these recipes, I knew I had to put everything into it. And that was kind of what that 2019 timeframe was, because 7 years is a long time to feel like nothing's happening.
Yeah. And obviously something was happening. I think that I just always sense that maybe it's not happening at the speed we want it to happen, right, at the growth rate we want it to happen, maybe that the income level we want it to happen, but you were forming your voice.
Yeah.
You were hard. It is hard. And I think until you actually are willing to try and talk about things in a way that either feels authentic or doesn't, then you don't really know. So congratulations for sticking with it. We're 6 years after that.
Yeah, right.
Which is crazy to believe.
Those 6 years went much faster than the previous ones.
Yeah, and I think that's fascinating. Tell me why you think that is.
I think it's because, well, one, during that time, so in 2021, this became full-time for two of us. And now we've even added some freelance people. And so I think all of that, it really makes a different switch when you go from it being a passion-only project, kind of zero income, to being your only income and you're fully ingrained in it. When I remember when we made that switch, we're like, wow, we are going to have so much time on our hands. We're going to be able to just have these normal work days and then have all this time off. And it all once became the opposite, where you had the normal workday and then you kept working because you're just at home in that work all the time. And I think that makes it go somehow faster because you don't have that mindset of, I'm leaving and then coming home to do the thing I really want to do. You're just constantly always doing it. So it kind of makes it speed up. And a lot of more, I would say, exciting things happen in that. During growth periods, you kind of become energized. You get a little bit more excited to post things. But then also with that, you get those pitfalls of things changing on social media, reels being introduced. Yeah. I would say even, money-wise, Facebook used to be our biggest driver. And then they changed long form videos. And so the recipes I posted, I think like 80% drop in that. Thankfully, in that time, we built a website that was stronger too. But, all those things, you're kind of just in the minutia of everything. And it just makes it go fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. And when you're talking about food and cooking and family that you live near, and your subject matter is just as close as your kitchen or, right, next door, you're really truly immersed in it all the time. But I think the best cookbooks come from those places where we are immersed in the subject that we're working on, like all the time. Let's suppose you were going to set out and write a cake book. You would have to get immersed in cakes, right?
Oh my, yes, yeah, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
all the different
for
kinds of
sure.
cakes in Iowa, right?
Yeah,
And so,
right.
so then it's just like, well, I'm making all these cakes and I'm serving all these cakes, and so I love that you. I just think that food lends itself to that, and it is hard to get
Yeah.
away from. But the more we get into it, the more we get out of it. And
That's actually a really good way to look at it. And
yeah,
I would have never thought, I think I was lucky in that being immersed in what I was second nature, that I wasn't thinking of it as a research project. It
yeah,
just was what I was doing. So
yeah,
it's not like this cookbook was a mind frame change. It was just taking everything I was doing and putting it into a
yes.
book, which now that you say it like that, it's like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense.
So how did it happen that you got your book contract? What happened between your website and social media and the book?
So honestly, it was one of those things where it was kind of just the stars aligned at the right time. It was during a period where things had been going well, videos had been going well, website traffic was good, but I was in New York for a different event. And an editor honestly reached out through Instagram and just said, "Hey, I see you're in New York. Have you ever thought of writing a cookbook? I'd love to talk." And I honestly at first thought it was spam, and I was like, what a weird way to contact someone. Like that can't be real. And then I was thinking about, because obviously cookbook was in the back of your mind as like, oh, a lot of people eventually in doing this are going to hopefully go towards a cookbook. At that same point, I had never saw myself as a writer and someone that thought I could do that necessarily. So I was like, well, we're just going to kind of take it as it comes. So it was kind of hard. Usually I'm someone that says no or gets scared, but I decided for some reason that day, thankfully, to say, you know what, I'm just going to message her back.
Yeah.
And so we did end up meeting, and we just talked, and she said, I've been following you for a long time, which, you have no idea who really follows you, like each individual person. So I had never talked to her
Yeah.
before. And she was wonderful. She happened to have lived in Iowa for a while growing up. So she understood the connection and she understood kind of the Midwest aspect of it. And we had just a really good conversation. And she said, if you've ever thought about it, I'd love to kind of go a little bit more in depth. And so we went away and I kind of wrote up what I thought a book would be like. And after talking a couple times, she sent a contract and it went from there.
Great. Great. Tell me, and maybe talk to audience a little bit about this thought that I'm not a writer. I don't know that I
Yeah.
could write a cookbook. Were you writing for social media and your website?
I mean, writing, yes. Like we
Yes.
had a newsletter, yes, and we have like posts. The posts are slightly more SEO driven. They have maybe a little bit of a creative intro. Beyond that, I never thought, and granted, I wouldn't say a cookbook is usually, in my mind, it wasn't something that I wasn't thinking, oh, it has to be heavy on writing. Mine ended up being actually very heavy on writing. So I didn't realize those stories and those like things were going to come out as I was doing it. But I think it was a way for me to be able to show this connection between, almost make a case for why am doing what I'm doing and why it's important to me to share this food. Because I think that was my struggle.
Yeah.
I was just always in my head, this is the food I grew up with. And I grew up in a family that's just very, like, if you tell my grandma still, she will make a meal still for us. And
Yes.
if you say, oh, grandma's was really good, her always response is, oh, it's just the food I make. It's nothing special.
Yeah.
And so I think that was my type
Yeah.
of thinking, like, oh, this is nothing special. What do I have to share about it? But this book was kind of, I call it now kind of a love letter to my family and the food they kind of taught me, because it makes a case for the food, I think.
Right. And it's nothing special because it was just such a part of your all's life.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
what you all did.
Yeah.
It's what you grew. It's what
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like you said, you wake up, you figure out what you're having for dinner. It's just like
Right.
always on your mind, always thinking about it. And that to a lot of people is very unusual, believe it or not. I mean, people are
Yeah.
like, I can't believe that you like think about food all the time.
Right.
Like, well, that's what we do when we're cookbook
We're
writers. But I'm
hungry.
glad that you didn't let that obstacle of I'm not a writer like stop you from moving forward with the project, because it stops a lot of people.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Oh, I think it's that whole, again, I think if we take the whole snapshot of what I've been doing, it's that finding your voice. That's the
Yes.
important part.
Yes.
And thankfully, by the time I actually sat down to do this book, I had had those years of finding my voice. Otherwise, like if I would have tried to do this in 2015 or wherever, it would not have happened in the same way. And I don't think it would have been meaningful.
Yeah.
I think it would have been very forced.
Yeah.
By the time, thankfully, I wrote this, I had somewhat been finding my voice and kind of connected. This is where social media is wonderful. I've connected with an audience and understood what they're connecting to. And I think that helped me find my voice, but giving me confidence in that voice too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it is kind of interesting. You may think they're going to connect to one thing and you put something out and they just like totally eat it up, no pun intended. It's like, wow,
Oh,
I didn't really
absolutely.
expect them to connect to that in that way.
Right.
Yeah.
Oh my, yeah.
Yeah. Well, the irony of you living in Iowa is one of the biggest creative writing programs in the country is based in Iowa.
It is just right up in Iowa City, which is funny because the local bookstore up there, Prairie Lights, is very known for. And so it was funny. I've just been doing a couple events with them for this
That's
cookbook. And yeah,
so
it
great.
is kind of comical. Yeah.
Yeah. And your book does have a lot of things to read. So for people that do love to read cookbooks, there is a lot of fun, really nice things to read. And I think that that's something that we need to be sure to mention, because not all cookbooks are as text heavy, but I think that just varies from book to book to book.
Yes, absolutely.
So tell us about Iowa. I write Kentucky cookbooks. I can sit here and tell you about Kentucky and all the reasons I love it, but I want to hear about Iowa.
I think there can be a lot of, obviously, Iowa's a bigger state than some people think. It takes a long time to get across the state. So within that, you're going to have a lot of different areas that have different heritage. I specifically come from a Mennonite heritage, not Amish, but Mennonite, in that we are very obviously farm and kind of what I would call traditional, like meat and potato type cooking. So a lot of the time, wives were at home and they were cooking to help the farm. They were preserving the food. They were, feeding the whole family, usually a big family. And it was just kind of, I call it in my cookbook sometimes like the quiet cook in the kitchen. Like, it's not that they were trying to necessarily impress people or make these lavish meals. It was just about sustenance and feeding people. So to me, Iowa food at its core is fresher than some people will think. I think during kind of the 80s and 90s, it went through iterations of being a lot more processed and things as that came out. But I think at its core, it was a lot of garden produce. It was using it in a lot of different ways, which was the standard produce, but lots of potatoes and root vegetables, lots of, peas and carrots, all those things. And then also usually was heavy on meat. Just because farms usually had, an abundance of meat. But it was, to me, it's very, I would say Midwest comfort food is how a lot of people would take it. But there's also a lot of lighter aspects that I think we kind of, we easily glaze over and forget about because we just assume it was always those. And for me growing up, we always had maybe a bigger meal, obviously on Sundays, sometimes on like nights, but otherwise it was much more lighter food, things from the garden. We were having lots of BLTs or leftovers reutilized, which like my pot roast, sandwich where you kind of make like, I call it beef salad, which kind of sounds weird, but that was what you made out of leftovers and you had those in different ways through the week. So to me, there's a lot of variance in what people can think Iowa food is.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, tell me when I think about a state like that, if I were to say to you, Kaleb, what's the difference between farming and gardening? What would you say?
Ooh, that's going to touch. That's actually really interesting because I think people outside the state call me a farmer. And I think that's fun. And I did grow up on a farm and I live on a farmstead now. To me, farming in my head is going to be you're cultivating fields and usually growing something more of like a large crop, a monocrop of either corn or soybeans. In Iowa, that's what it would be. Other states, it'd be wheat or something. Gardening is going to be more small scale, usually vegetables and or obviously, your landscape perennials, things like that. So gardening to me is more going to be your vegetable based, like food type. Farming is going to be larger scale livestock and or crops.
Yeah. And your father and your grandparents, farmers, correct?
Yes. Yep. That's what I grew up
and gardeners, I guess.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Interesting. And so I think that growing up on a farm doesn't always mean that you're growing monocrops or you have cattle. But it doesn't always mean you garden either, I guess. But you kind of have the best of both worlds, it sounds like. I
wouldn't have thought about it. I often tell people like, okay, it was not Laura Ingalls, like out on the wild. But like there are aspects like now when I talk about it, I think there are parts of it that are very ideal. I was lucky. My grandparents lived across the road. My parents were at home working on the farm. My mom was outside in the garden a lot. My dad was out and his dad, my grandpa was out helping him all the time. And we were together all the time. Every meal was spent together around our table, breakfast, lunch, and dinner if we weren't in school. And that it was really in those ways, I guess, ideal. And it taught me a lot about whether it was chores on the farm and or gardening with one of the grandmas or mom. I was just a part of it all.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's just the nature of the work that you do. And also, having your father and grandfather farming, their their office was there
Right.
as in the
Yeah.
field. It was
Yeah.
on their tractors doing what they were doing. So
Yeah.
I'm sure they were always when. Did you all have your big meal in the evening or in the middle
We
of the
did
day?
usually. I
Yeah.
know some people do some farm things like the tradition is noon, but we almost always did in the evening. Dad
Yeah.
didn't, I don't think dad or grandpa liked a heavy noon meal
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
because it would kind of slow him down, I
Yeah.
think, in the afternoon.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. All right. So let's talk a little bit about the book.
Yeah.
You've got the contract. You had to, pitch an idea. You did.
Hmm.
Then you wrote your manuscript, and tell us about a little bit about that process for you. What was it like to create a manuscript and a concept for a book versus, having social media or a website?
I think the big difference for me was at first I kept feeling like everything felt too compartmentalized. Because see, I'm used to when you post a recipe day to day, wherever many you post in a week or not, they don't always weave a story or go together. You're just posting kind of one-off things. And usually it's just to put onto my website because I feel there's either gaps or things I want to add. The book in other ways, when I was putting together, I was like, oh, I want there to be a thread going through it, or I want there to be more of a reason that these are kind of grouped together. And so for me, that took a little bit more time. And maybe that's why it became a little heavier on writing, because I was able to kind of weave throughout the book, the reason these are in this book and why they're together or how one goes to the next. Because I think at first it was just feeling too much of like this, like, open west where you're just like, well, anything and everything could go in, but that means that's way too much
Yeah.
options. So you
Yeah.
really have to like narrow it in and
Yeah.
say, what has meaning or why is there a purpose? Like each recipe I went through, I feel like I was saying, why is this here? And I had to justify it to myself
Yeah.
before it could be there. And on the website, you just don't do that as much because they all have a point to be on the website, hopefully.
Yeah. And you had 3 things in your cookbook that when putting it together, 3 rules for picking the recipes that you put in it. Let's talk a little bit about what those rules were.
Yeah.
Number
I
1,
think
it said reminiscent of your grandma, your mom,
that.
or your great grandma.
Hmm. I think these were kind of my jumping off point a little bit. And so I wanted this book. One, I wanted to look at it that if you've been following me, this is going to be something exciting, not
Yeah.
just something I've done.
Yeah.
And I also want it to be, if you haven't been following me, you're going to understand my story and where I'm coming from. So I wanted that to show that these are all going to have some form of nostalgia. They might be very updated. They might be developed to a different point, but they're coming from a place where they had a purpose in my family heritage.
Yeah.
So that's where those women kind of come into play and
Yeah.
their recipes. And I wanted that to be known.
Yeah. Can we talk about the meat salad while we're talking about that? Tell me about the meat salad. I didn't grow up eating. If we had meat salad in Central Kentucky, it was
Yeah.
ham salad
Ham salad,
or
yeah.
tuna salad, maybe chicken salad occasionally.
Did you make your ham salad with like an actual cured ham, or did you do it with something?
My mom would use leftover cured,
Oh, she would.
not Kentucky country ham,
Right,
but like
right.
city ham, cured
Yeah.
city ham. Yeah.
You know what we did, what ham salad was to me? It's really kind of gross. It was always bologna.
Yeah.
That's all grandma made it with.
When I lived in Michigan for a couple of years right after I got married, and we would go. I worked as a nutritionist for the WIC clinic, and we would go out to a remote area in Michigan to serve the clients that were out there, and we would eat at a drugstore for lunch. And I would either get grilled cheese or they had bologna salad on the menu.
Oh, yeah.
But I don't know if they called it bologna salad or ham salad.
Yeah,
I can't remember.
Ham salad, but
it was bologna. Yeah, mom's was like ground up city ham. So
yeah,
then
which is good. I love it. Yeah.
Yeah. And then my husband was from Southern Illinois, and he said his mother always ground up roast beef and made salad. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Oh, isn't it good?
Isn't that funny? So tell us about the meat salad that you have in the book and what it is.
So I should say this is one of my mom's actually favorite things. She would sometimes almost want to make a roast just to have this. So anytime she would probably always, my mom was one that would always make extra. So there were always leftovers. So I grew up with leftovers being very central to how we ate a lot of times. But if there was leftover roast, she would sometimes just do two roasts for this. She would kind of grind up or shred that roast. It was always beef we did it with. And then you make just pretty much a cold salad out of it. So it has the mayonnaise, it has hard-boiled egg. For us, it always has like a pickle relish because we home canned pickle relish. So that was an easy thing to add into it. But it was really simple. But honestly, it still is something that when I don't, make as many roasts probably as we did growing up. But when I do, it is so delicious to be able to have on a sandwich.
Yeah.
And I think it's just when you describe it to people, it's a hard one to sell because it sounds like something they're not used to. Like chicken salad's an easy sell.
Yeah.
People are like, oh yeah, chicken salad. When you say beef salad or meat, you're just like, ew, you don't want that. But you do because it has those same elements and it's super nostalgic. I think it's an old school, like you're calling them meat salads. That's an old school thing, either to use up probably a lot of foods or just to be able to make a cold sandwich out of something.
That's right. That's right. I think it's unique. You have eggs in your meat salad. I think the ham salad just had just pickle relish. And I'm not sure that the ground meat salad that my husband's Southern Illinois family made I don't think it had eggs. That's neat.
Oh, really?
But we would eat egg salad though, deviled eggs and then or egg salad.
Yeah.
So hard-boiled eggs make a lot of things like 10 times better.
They do. They're just good.
So good. Okay, so that rule number 1 was the reminiscent of nostalgia. So rule 2 then is ingredients had to be readily available in southeastern Iowa grocery stores, meaning they'd be available for pretty much anyone.
Yeah. I think a lot of people that followed had come to know me as having a lot of recipes like that, just because I do live in a rural area. And while I can get to specialty grocery stores in not too long of time, I wanted this book, especially as a first cookbook, to really be a representation of that food. Because if I'm going to be talking about my great-grandmas, they were not used to a lot of those ingredients. So I didn't want to branch out too far. Now, granted, there's a couple things in here. Like I do use tahini in a recipe. My local grocery store, though, now that is at a very small town, almost everyone has that now. Yeah. So I tried still to make that the calling card because I wanted people. But my best compliment to me from this book is I've had a few people that will tell me, this is just real food. And I had most ingredients to start just making stuff right away. Yeah. And that to me is like, well, that's the point. Granted, I love a cookbook that is the opposite way too, that just like makes me like think and try things. But I'm so excited that on my first cookbook, people can say like, oh, I can just start going. And that to me is like, that's exciting. Yeah. And it makes it feel more representative of how I grew up too.
That's right. And you want people, when you're writing, some books people do, they're very aspirational to be read and studied and maybe trying some different things. But a book like this, I can imagine you did want people to enjoy it and to cook from it. And I think it makes a difference if the ingredients are readily available. How far to the nearest supermarket for you?
Like 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So it's not too bad. I mean, because I live close to now like a highway, it only takes about 15 minutes or 20 in either way. So.
But still, if you think about it, if there's something that you need.
Oh, yeah. Nope.
You're an hour going, picking it up and driving back before you
have a fully stocked pantry all the time.
Yes. Yeah. I think that's great. And then the third thing is the resulting recipes had to be both no nonsense and delicious.
Mm-hmm. I just wanted it to be good food, food like if some of it, take the meat or beef salad, for instance. If I'm going to try to talk someone into doing that, I wanted them also, if they were going to go to the work of making it, I wanted them to take a bite and say, oh, this is why he wanted me to make it. Like I wanted it to be worth making and not just be, because I know sometimes I think the hard part is words can sometimes talk you into making something. And then if you don't feel like it's fulfilling what the words were saying, you're then really disappointed. And I don't want someone to be disappointed. I want them to read the story about why it's important and then taste it and have it be just as good as they were hoping.
Right. Well, I think that sounds great. And tell me about the pickle wraps. There was a recipe of a pickle wrap. I think I need to talk to Kaleb about pickle wraps.
That's a slight update so I'm sure you've had the normal like pickle wraps that have like a flour tortilla and like some type of cream cheese and like maybe a piece of ham and a pickle.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And so I loved those growing up. I would probably hide like a plate of them and just like hoard them for myself if it was a potluck or something. But I like the idea that you can take things like that and make them slightly, not elevated, but just a little bit more kind of something exciting. And so in the snack section, it uses puff pastry and it kind of takes the same idea. I think it adds more flavor. Definitely. it definitely kind of enhances it a little bit more. It chops up the pickles, puts them with that cream cheese, you roll them up, and then they get that puffy, crispy, delicious thing. But they're super quick because you can use the store-bought puff. So it's still a delicious appetizer.
Yeah. One of the stories I enjoyed reading was about the day the corn was harvested and how
Oh, yeah.
you all
Sweet
basically
corn.
set up an assembly line.
Yes, for sweet corn. Yes.
Yes.
We put away a lot of sweet corn. So that's always ready a lot earlier than like field corn is. Sweet corn is usually ready in August. And so it's usually when it's really hot. So you'd go out really early in the morning, pick a lot of sweet corn. And there were times because both grandmas would come do it with us and sometimes even another relative. And so there were years where you'd put 200 to 300 pint away in a day. And that's for the freezer. We only froze corn. We were one of those people that we liked it frozen, not canned.
Yeah.
So we always froze it. But it was a big day. And it was, as a child, it was exciting because everyone was around and you were just having this big day. You would have lunch together and it was just a fun kind of day. Obviously, the adults probably found it more as work because as I grew up later and started helping, I realized, yeah, no, it's a lot of work too.
And it sounded like there was a discussion about the order in which you did things, from the cutting it off the cob to the blanching it or the cooking it before you freeze it.
Well, everyone has their method when it comes to preserving, and that can be a little contentious. I personally think we have the best method. You definitely clean it off. You husk it and then get all the like little silks off. And then after you wash it, you cook it just for 5 minutes. Then you plunge it into ice water, and it has to be cold to the core. And my one grandma would always test it. She would always cut a little bit off, hold it up to her mouth to make sure, because I think she could feel better on her her fingers. She must not have been able to feel, so she did it on her lips. But then if it was cold to the core, if there was any warmth, it had to go back in, because you want that to be pretty much. It's kind of like, individually quick frozen our vegetables, but if you chill it, after you chill it and make sure it's chilled, that flavor will retain when you cut it off and then freeze the kernels.
Otherwise, when you're freezing it, the freezer's working to try to cool it down and not freeze it, right?
Yeah, right. And it will get the frosty bits on it then and stuff. Yeah.
And then when you would pull it out, you probably just had some delicious corn in the
and we still do it. So I still have corn in the freezer.
Yeah.
We don't do as much every year, but we still do it.
Yeah. So tell us about your quick pickles. I think pickles are something that are probably a lot more approachable than people might realize. It doesn't require a ton of canning equipment or specialty. So talk about your quick pickles.
I think quick pickles are a great way to kind of dip your toes into preserving. If you're a little scared maybe of water bath or shelf stable, or maybe you just never want to go to that route, quick pickles are so great because, one, let's just say you have extra produce or you have a CSA box or you went to your farmer's market and overbought. You can really quickly put something together. So in here I have a few, to me, of my favorites. I love a pickled carrot. I think they are underrated and we don't pickle them enough because they are so crunchy. And that's another thing about quick pickles. They retain that fresh, crisp crunch because you're not cooking them at all. As opposed to if you're going to make, pickles to put in your basement for over the year, you're going to have to cook those for like 10 minutes in a water bath. Quick pickles, you pour a hot brine over. So it just slightly will maybe, take a little bit of that super hard crunch off, but still retain it. You throw them in the fridge. So the carrots I love the jardinera too, which is a little bit more of a Chicago thing, but I did grow up loving it. And so it has that kind of slight spice, briny. It's great on sandwiches. It's so good on roasts. And I just think it's such a fun way to kind of realize preserving is not hard work. It's a brine, you pour it on, that's it.
And then you store them in the refrigerator?
Yes.
Absolutely. Very nice. Yeah. No, I think they're delicious. And, I see a lot of restaurants using quick pickles, making their own quick pickles. And I do think it's something that's very approachable. And even if you have a garden, or like you said, if you shop at a farmer's market or have a CSA box, it's a great way to preserve the vegetables that you get there. Okay. One more food we need to talk about is tater tots.
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to know about the trajectory of tater tots in the nostalgia time frame, like with your grandmas,
like when they came in.
Yeah. And did you grow up with them, or like was it like something that was always there, or did they like come on the scene and everybody's like, oh my gosh, this is like revolutionary? I'm just curious what your memories are about tater tots.
I remember them somewhat young, as usually being in the freezer, and Mom would not often, but she would, I think it was probably one of those like rescue meal type nights when she wasn't sure what to make. She would pull out, and she would often just make more of a traditional tater tot casserole. It's the only way we ever had them. We never had them as like a side. We never pulled tater tots out for anything other than that
And it
casserole.
would be a
So
topping for the casserole. Is that right?
absolutely,
Right.
yes. Always
Yeah.
a topping. How else do you get that perfect crisp? I mean, let's all be honest. Hash browns have their place because making them at home to be as good is hard. But
Yes.
those frozen ones, while the ingredients are usually not bad on them, have the best crisp and flavor you're going to have.
Yeah.
So I will have say there is always a certain place in my heart for them. So I put them together with calico beans because mom always made calico beans. That was like her go-to for a potluck or anything, and kind of made them into a cowboy calico bean with some ground meat in them so you can still get that casserole element, and then topped them
I
with,
see the tater tots.
yeah,
It's
but
funny
I
you
don't
didn't have tater tots as a side dish. Like if you,
know,
yeah,
never.
grill a hamburger, have tater tots on the side. No.
You know what? I don't know why. I'm gonna guess honestly for my mom, they would have been probably at the time, probably a little bit more expensive. Like she
Yes.
really tried not to buy a lot of
Yeah.
grocery store like
Yeah.
processed items. And so
Yeah.
I think they're probably only used once in a while because that would have been an expensive side dish as opposed to just making quick hash browns or something,
Yeah.
which she
Or if
would have
she
done.
had potatoes,
Yes,
did
because we
she
always
grow
had potatoes
potatoes?
from the garden.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Then she would probably just want to use
Yes.
those. Right.
Which we actually canned potatoes, and those were so good to make hash browns out of.
Wow. Canning potatoes. That
Oh yeah,
requires a
canned
special,
meat.
I mean, that you talk about something that requires a special type of canning. You probably had to pressure can them, I would
Oh
imagine.
yeah, you did. Same with meat though. We used to can
Yeah.
meat, and that you had to
Yeah.
pressure too.
Yeah.
So
Do you do any pressure canning now?
I do. Green beans, I will still
Still
pressure
pressure
can.
can. Yeah, I
Yeah.
interviewed a woman for the podcast maybe a little bit over a year ago, and her cookbook was all about pressure canning. She
Oh
pressure cans
wow.
everything:
That's
meat,
awesome. Yeah.
potatoes,
Yep.
vegetables. She says once you learn, you'll never. She just loved it, and she loved it that much that that's what she wanted. That's how she differentiated herself, was through just talking about pressure
And
cooking.
it does to me, pressure canning, it is literally like riding a bike. Once you get into it, it is
Yeah,
not scary. It's
yeah,
nothing. It just does take a little bit of practice or understanding of what you're doing.
yeah,
But once you do that, it really isn't.
yeah,
Yeah, it just depends also how you want to eat and how you want to use your food.
yeah.
Pressure canning has a different texture than other things. So it just kind of anymore, I'm slightly more on the side of preserving a lot more in the freezer because I
Hmm.
like that texture of certain
Yeah,
things. But it just
yeah,
depends.
yeah. That's right. Okay, so one more thing I wanted to ask you about is the refrigerator oatmeal cookies. It looked like a really unique way to make oatmeal cookies. Tell me about that recipe.
That's one of my grandma's old recipes, and I remember her making them some. I think what she had, granted, which was again, it's a time period thing. There used to be so many refrigerator cookies.
Yeah,
Like, I mean, which now, I mean, I guess what people would probably call like a slice and bake or
yeah,
something, which when you think about it, the grocery store cookies really are just a fridge cookie.
yeah,
They can slice and bake.
yeah.
What I love about these is one, you can make fridge cookies, like always have a log in your freezer if you want to, and that you could have them fresh cookies anytime, which I know we say that about a lot of things, but these really are easy to do that with.
Yeah.
And I like actually the flavor that comes out of them. You actually do get a better, to me, it's not just like an oatmeal chocolate chip cookie. You get a little bit more of that oatiness coming from them and a little bit more of that toasty flavor that I really love.
Yeah.
And they're just, to me, a simple, delicious cookie.
Yeah, they looked a little bit more shortbready too, like maybe
Yeah.
it's because
Yeah.
of the dough and the way that when you
Right.
roll it and slice it off, but
Mhm.
they looked really good. And I think that was one of the unique cookie
I
recipes.
love those. I
Yeah.
love a slice and bake cookie though. I just
Yeah.
think I love them.
Yeah. And I think I talked to somebody once. I've talked to tons of people on the podcast. She said, I go to so and so's house, and every time I went, I mean, they literally she would just pull these things like baking cookies out of the freezer. And when you can become a cook like that, like if
Yeah.
someone's gonna stop over, you're like, oh, I've made these cookies just a minute ago, but you don't have to
Yep.
go to a ton of trouble because you have the dough in your
Exactly.
freezer. It's just like wows
You're
people.
impressing people, but without them realizing it
That's
really
right.
doesn't take much effort.
And like you said, who doesn't love a fresh baked cookie? I mean,
I
it's
know, right? Like right now, I'm trying to think, like, do I have any in the freezer that I can go make?
I know, so that'd be good. All right. So as we're wrapping up, one of the things I love to know from my guests is if you have a favorite cookbook, what that might be.
So I have a lot of favorites. You can see them behind me, but I will say this is the one that taught me to cook. And what I hate about saying this is my favorite is that people can't just go buy it. It is a local church cookbook called the Sugar Creek Mennonite Church Cookbook.
Yeah.
It's the orange cookbook because they came out with a few different ones. I think it's from the 70s. And it's just those classic, it's the chocolate cake with coffee in it that's always moist and delicious. It's, the different salads that are just nostalgic. It's just, to me, my go-to. It is going to be the one that's most dog-eared, actually.
Yeah.
I mean, it is so used because my mom, fortuitously, when she was really young, married, made sure she had copies to give my sister and I because she used it so much. So she'd
Oh,
bring me
wow.
copies. that she could give us later. And it still is the one
And it's Sugar Creek Mennonite Church Cookbook. Is that the name of it?
It's literally, you know what? Let me grab it.
Got it? Okay. I'll see if there's let's see. I'll put a link.
I'll be surprised, but
Sugar Creek Mennonite Cookbook. Yeah.
It is.
It looks great. I love the drawing on the front.
This one was actually my grandma, so she has different things in here written that
so
she would always
neat.
change.
Yes, her notes and things. Yes,
it still kind of smells like her.
That's sweet. Okay, I've got one question. Do you cook for your dog?
I went through a period where I did. He had some health issues where he has to now be on a really special diet, so now I don't.
Yes,
just because he needs special food. But I did go through a period, where I did.
Yeah.
I would do anything for him. Anything.
I know a lot of people do cook for their dog, but I always say, please, if you're going to cook for your dog, don't order DoorDash for yourself. You owe it to yourself to cook for yourself.
Yeah.
And then you can cook for your dog.
No, and just granted, DoorDash isn't even available where I live. So it's not going to be an option here.
Okay, well, what would it be if someone said, Kaleb, don't cook for your dog and do this for yourself? What would it be? TV dinners? I don't know. Frozen meals? I have no idea.
I am one of those people. I don't know. I'm really someone that I love cooking every night. Even if I've cooked all day during the day or if I've been in the garden all day, I'm still going to come in and make something. So I don't have I don't trying to sound elitist on that either. I will always want that process and time of me just putting something together, just a salad sometimes.
Yeah.
And being I made that. I don't know why. I
think it's a chance to, it marks the end of my day. It's okay, I'm slowing down a little bit. I'm going to feed myself now. And it's a little bit of a ritual to that. I have a certain podcast I listen to. So I think that there's, and so if people don't get into that kind of a habit, they maybe don't really understand it. But that takes us back to the beginning where you're willing to lean into who you are, what you love to do. And people do connect with those things. And
I hope so.
It's wonderful.
I agree.
Yep. So I wish you the best of luck with your book. There's always room at the table. People can check your website to see where you're signing books or what's going on.
Absolutely. Yep. Okay. I always keep it updated there and on social media.
Okay. And they can connect with you on social media. Give us a couple of the places where you
Instagram and Facebook. I do daily stories and it's just under Wise Guide on both of those. WYSEGUIDE. And my website is wiseguide.com. So I'm kind of an easy person to find.
Very good. All the same. All right. Well, it's been terrific to have you on the show. Have a lot of fun promoting your book. Summer's coming, so that means the gardens are going to be going in. And
that's right.
That's great. All right. Well, thanks again.
Thanks so much for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you so much for joining us today for this episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. Again, all the links can be found in the show notes at www.cookbooklove.co. And if you are interested in writing a cookbook of your own, please check out the free cookbook writing masterclass called How to Get Paid to Write a Cookbook. It is designed specifically for food or nutrition experts, and you can check that out at www.cookbookwritersacademy.com/free. So that's it for today's episode of the Cookbook Love podcast. This is your host, Maggie Green, and until next time, have a great day and keep loving your cookbooks.
Thanks for listening to the Cookbook Love podcast. You can find out more information at www.cookbooklove.co.